About a week ago, I asked all of you to give me your most unpopular Call of Duty Zombies opinions, and today I decided I'll go through and read a bunch of them and give you my overall thoughts on the particular unpopular opinions. There were so many opinions that were given, so I could not do all of them, unfortunately, but we have a decent amount here to talk about. I think this will be interesting. For the first unpopular opinion, we have this from Dalbertran8135, and they say, going back to Black Ops 4, I can say that Toten went from a C tier map to an A tier. It's just so much fun, plus with the boots that prevent water from slowing you down. Also, Deadshot and PhD is actually useful since the Wunderwaffe needs headshots to be more effective than the OG Wunderwaffe, and the Tundra gun is really great. I guess he was trying to say really good after the buff. The most underrated map in BO4. So to be completely honest, I think Toten is a solid map. I just don't like the Easter egg. I think it's not that good of an Easter egg, especially compared to some of the other BO4 Easter eggs. I think story-wise, it's fantastic, but the actual gameplay of the Easter egg is probably some of the worst from Black Ops 4, other than like Blood of the Dead, of course, at least in my opinion. It's just a big collectathon of, find a bunch of pieces of meat around the map and you gotta, throw snowballs at orbs. It's just not the most interesting Easter egg we've ever seen. But the actual core gameplay itself, when you're not doing the Easter egg, it's actually a decent map. There's a lot of side quests on it, a lot of useful side quests with cool rewards. For example, the heat pack and the ice pick that you can use to like break yourself out of the ice easier. Stuff like that's just really cool. So I will agree, this is definitely an underrated map. Next hot take comes from Living Dead Guy 115, and he says Toten shouldn't have been the Ether finale. It was good for what it was, but with the low budget cutscenes and the anticlimactic boss fight along with a Call of the Dead remake, no hate, I just wish they should have ended it with at least one new brand map. I do kind of agree, although the way they ended the story was pretty perfect, it was really well written, it does feel anticlimactic not having like a big end boss fight and some kind of like new original map. I do think it makes sense to end the final map where it was. I think people kind of look past the importance of the Siberian facility in terms of the story. It makes perfect sense to end it there, but at the same time, it would have been more special and interesting to have a new map and something that just felt a little bit more epic. I don't really feel like Toten fits the topic of epic. It doesn't feel epic, so I do kind of agree with you, but at the same time, in terms of writing, I think they did do a good job with how the actual story ended. Next hot take comes from It's Too Spooky For Me, and he says, Zombies in Spaceland is a better launch map than Shadows of Evil. Spaceland offers way more content than Shadows, plus the Spaceland crew are more funny and interesting than the Shadows crew, and there's David Hasselhoff. Spaceland also feels like its own thing, while Shadows is basically Mob of the Dead plus Origins. So I do agree that Spaceland is a better map, not just better launch map, I think it's a better map, period. I think it's, in my opinion, it's my favorite map of all time at this point. But I don't know if I agree with the whole Spaceland also, it feels like its own thing, whereas Shadows doesn't. Of course, Spaceland does feel like its own thing, but Shadows, I think, kind of has its own identity too. Yes, there's a lot of different mechanics that do kind of relate similarly to Mob of the Dead and Origins, but I feel like it sets itself apart enough, especially in the aesthetics and the theme of it, and even just how the map plays itself. I think it's quite unique in that way, but yeah, I can see it definitely takes a lot of inspiration from Mob of the Dead and Origins, which overall I don't really think is a bad thing either. The next one comes from Smooth Norris. He says, Cold War Zombies is underrated as it spent time returning zombies back to what was before BO4, while also expanding on the changes made in BO4, such as a new point system, new objectives, and customization, but old perks with a fresh new system. It may be easy in catering to casuals, but hardcores don't make up the majority of the COD player base, so they're not owed anything. Oh boy, this is a fun one to talk about. This will be interesting. There's stuff I can agree with here, but also a lot of stuff I disagree with, so let's break it down a little bit. So first of all, he says it's underrated. I don't see this as underrated whatsoever, not even just from my own personal opinion on the mode, because I don't hate Cold War, I've said that before, I think it's just fine, but I think a lot of people do give it a lot of love already currently, especially when you look at, people just beyond the Twitter, sphere, the Twitter Zombies community. If you look beyond that, there are a lot of people who do like and appreciate Cold War Zombies, so it's hard for me to consider it underrated when even myself, I don't really consider it that great of a zombies mode. So personally, I'd probably call it overrated for me, but it's completely fine if, someone else has that disagreement. Again, these are all just disagreements. That's all fine. Then there's also, he says that they spent time returning zombies back to what it was before BO4. Now, I don't really get that entirely because I don't think Cold War really feels like classic zombies at all. I could see the only similarity really being like if you go back to like Black Ops 1 in terms of how simplistic the maps were, I guess back then, that I can kind of understand. But in terms of everything else, the systems and everything in place, they don't feel like classic zombies at all. So I can't really agree with that being, you know, zombies back to what it was before BO4. And there's a new point system as well. He says they expand on some of the, you know, Black Ops 4 changes. That's true. I agree with that. Of course, they expanded on the point system, but I don't think it was in a good way, though. I kind of prefer how the point system was before BO4. New objectives and customization. I mean, objectives is a strange term, I feel like, because yeah, there's objectives in certain modes like Outbreak that they actually call them objectives, but Easter eggs are kind of objectives too. They're just hidden objectives. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I kind of feel like we've always had objectives in zombies. And then customization, they technically have had that since like BO3, but Cold War did go a step further in some places with customization. That is true. It may be easy in catering to casuals, but hardcore don't make up the majority of the player base, so they're not owed anything. I disagree with that heavily. Of course, you have to take into account casuals and hardcore players. That's kind of what these developers should be doing, and I do think that's a good thing to do. But I don't think the hardcore fans aren't owed anything. These are the fans that play the game more than anyone. I mean, they are the ones who are probably putting in, you know, hours upon hours every single week, whereas most casuals are not playing the game that frequently. And I know we don't have statistics on this or anything, but I'd be pretty certain that hardcore players probably are the ones purchasing the stuff in the shop more than anyone. I don't think casuals who are hopping on the game twice per month are really buying that many bundles in the store. Maybe they'll buy, you know, 1 or 2 bundles, but they're not wasting their money on the battle passes. They're not going to have enough time to even complete the battle pass. I consider myself a hardcore player, and even I don't always finish the battle passes because I just don't have the time to play that much anymore. So it's really hard to go into specifics because obviously we don't have all the stats in the world, but I do feel like hardcore players should be owed something. They should be owed a decent mode that works for them because they have done that in the past. It's not like they've never done that before. It's not like Call of Duty Zombies has always been just fully for casuals and that's it. There's always been stuff for hardcore players. So that's why I felt like this big change in Cold War where I felt like hardcore players were kind of neglected. I don't think that's a good thing, at least in my personal opinion. Next, we have another Cold War Zombies hot take. This one comes from Matsuki, and he says, Cold War was the best zombies experience we've ever gotten, but we may never see another zombies like it again due to how an incomplete BR map got turned into Outbreak, an unfortunate circumstance that led to something really fun, on top of Onslaught on every 2v2 plus 6v6 and 12v12 multiplayer map, a mode that existed because of PlayStation exclusivity, and the fact that we've still heard nothing about a returning in MW3, a zombies game without classic zombies, a COD that came out after the backlash of Vanguard Zombies and still having no round-based or classic maps. Because of those two things on top of classic zombies maps and Dead Ops Arcade existing all in one game, and how the COD community seems to have received them, very split between people that liked Black Ops 3 versus Black Ops Cold War, I feel like it goes underappreciated, and because it goes underappreciated, there's no incentive to do it again. They're more likely to focus on a zombies DMZ mode, since it is on the same Warzone map, not distinctly different sections of a fractured map, or classic style zombies going forward, because that is what built zombies to where it is today. I think the next Black Ops game will either make or break the zombies community, which isn't a hot take, but the reasons I've given are more so a hot take of mine. So there's definitely a lot to break down here. There's definitely a lot we can talk about. Just like what we talked about before, I do kind of disagree. I think it really just depends on, you know, where you are on, you know, Twitter and YouTube and who you're speaking to, because I personally have seen a lot of love and appreciation given towards Cold War Zombies. And again, it just depends what, you know, circles you're in, what people you're talking to, listening to online. So it's very possible that these people, they just haven't seen as much positivity on Cold War, but I've seen plenty. That's why I personally feel like it's an overrated game, is because I've been constantly seeing love for this zombies mode. And so it's hard to consider underappreciated just given how much love I have seen for it. But on that same note, I have seen a lot of criticism towards it, even from the people who love it, because they do, you know, agree that there are a lot of things that had to be held back in this game. You know, we couldn't get as much original content as we could, you know, in prior games. There wasn't as much, you know, actual things to do on the maps. There wasn't much personality given to the mode compared to other games like BO3 and 4. So even the people who do love the gameplay mechanics and love a lot of the features and stuff within this mode, they can kind of see that. So I could see maybe that aspect of it being underappreciated, but in general, I personally see a lot of love given to that game. So I do think the likelihood of Gulf War being very similar to Cold War Zombies is not that far-fetched. I actually think it's most likely going to happen. I know I've given my own personal opinions on that in the past, where I don't really want that to happen. I want them to go for their own thing while bringing back a lot of, you know, different feels that the old games delivered, like for example Black Ops 3, and maybe more content depth similar to something like Black Ops 4, where, you know, you can keep some of the Cold War mechanics, but I don't think they should keep all of them, because there are some things that I do think take away that original Zombies feel. But I do think a lot of what you're asking for here, for example, having classic Zombies maps and Dead Up's Arcade and Outbreak and Onslaught, that's very likely. Now, is Outbreak going to exist in this game? I personally hope not. I want them to put all their effort into round-based, but if they are going to have a, you know, open world zombies mode, it probably will be on the Warzone map, and it probably will be more similar to MWZ. But I don't know, we'll see. This next one comes from Thunderstruck 115. The Black Ops 4 perk system is actually better than the old perk system. The fact that crutch perks are gone gives the player more room to run what they want instead of running the meta, and the modifiers add a new layer of strategy to perk selection. This is a really interesting one. I picked it out because I disagree with the first part of it, that the BO4 perk system is better than the old perk system, but I actually do kind of agree with some other aspects of what they were saying here. I do think it's not as bad as people say. Like, for example, I really didn't care that they removed Juggernog, Speed Cola, Double Tap, because they did replace those in other avenues. Like, you can still get Speed Cola just by getting all 4 perks. You could still get Double Tap by just pack-a-punching your gun more times. You basically had Juggernog by default. I don't necessarily think that was like a great way to go about it, but it still was there. Quick Revive was still, you know, a different version of it, and then you had these self-revives themselves. Like, I actually liked how that worked more than the original Quick Revive worked. So there was aspects of it I didn't mind. My issue was just the general idea of forcing yourself to use these specific perks before the game even starts, because I like the idea of jumping into a match and not really knowing what perks I'm gonna get and then choosing as I go along. Like, that would be a lot more interesting. I didn't really have a problem with them removing the perks, but why make me choose the perks I want before the game? Why not just have the perks be on the map itself, and I can just go find what perks I want and choose them from there? That to me makes a lot more sense. And the idea of crutch perks, like, they still kind of existed even in BO4. I feel like not as much, you know, not to the same extent as stuff like Juggernog, of course, but they still did exist. I personally use Stamina Up in every class. I use Winter's Wail in every class. I most of the time use Dying Wish, not every class. The other perk usually kind of fluctuated between something like Quick Revive, sometimes Victorious Tortoise, sometimes Time Slip. It really depends on what I was doing, so there definitely was more perk variety than something like Black Ops 3, but I still felt like it wasn't the best avenue to go with the perk system. Personally, I still think Infinite Warfare has the best perk system because you can get up to 5 perks, and you can also switch them out as you go along. You don't have to down yourself to remove them, so you can like try out one perk for like 10 rounds, switch it out for a new perk, and then of course you can get all the perks when you do the Director's Cut Easter egg. So that to me, it was a better system personally. You know, Cold War has an interesting system. I just don't like the idea of all the perks having these permanent upgrades that just make them completely OP. But yeah, I definitely don't think BO4 perk system was better than the original one, just in my personal opinion. This next one comes from R Nathan 1792, and they say, to me, Der Eisendrache is the most overrated map of all time from a hardcore player perspective. It has next to no innovation, no new perks, guns, enemy types, and nearly everything in the map was pulled from other maps and modes. The 4 bows, idea reused from Origins and was a reskin of the Sparrow from multiplayer, Dragon Heads from Op the Dead, Wonder Fizz and Panzer from Origins, DG4s, reskinned Gravity Spikes. Also, why is DE the only map in BO3 with a slideshow intro? One thing I like about Zetsubo and Garad is that both maps are character specific. What is special about DE to Dempsey? Really nothing. While I don't think it is a bad map, it is not a top 5 map. The crazy thing about this is I do think Der Eisendrache is one of the best maps of all time, but I still agree with pretty much everything he says here. Like, it definitely is not that innovative of a map, other than maybe having the first like real good boss fight in Zombies. Of course, we did have the Descent boss fight, as well as the Shadows of Evil boss fight, but this was the first like really good one that felt really solid, and I love the Easter egg. But yeah, it doesn't do much in terms of like innovation. There's not much new stuff that's in the map really, but I think it just does everything so well that I don't really care. It still has its own personality and its own, you know, aesthetic, just like Shadows of Evil does, but yeah, it doesn't do that many unique things, and it certainly doesn't have many unique like items. You know, I guess the bows they're unique to me. I know the actual Sparrow is in multiplayer, but that doesn't look anything like what the bows look like on Der Eisendrache. So I personally don't, you know, 100% agree with that one point, but yeah, in general, it is bringing back a lot of other stuff. There's really not that many new things, but it's such a fantastic map in every way. Everything that it does, everything flows together so well. The Easter egg flows together so well. There's a lot of fun side quests on this map as well. I think it's just very fun, even just casually, just running around the courtyard endlessly. There's just a lot of fun to be had on this map. So even though I agree it's definitely not a very innovative map, it's still fantastic. This next one comes from Sandman 2000, and they got a couple of hot takes here. So first one is, we should have custom mutations return in Gulf War, not Gobblegums. To be honest, I don't see why we can't do both. Like, you could do both Gobblegums and custom mutations. I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. Next one is Richtofen's death in Blood of the Dead was not emotional because we got to play as that version of Richtofen in Alpha Omega. They should have replaced him with Weasel in Blood of the Dead and make up an excuse. I felt more emotional when the zombie Richtofen died in TOG. I partially agree with this, but not in the way that was described here, because I do think the issue is that they didn't really give us much time to feel emotional about it, and the problem is the other characters don't even feel that emotional about it. That to me is what ruins it. Like, why does every other character just not give a shit that Richtofen's literally dying? Like, they just kind of walked away, like, whatever. That to me was a bit off. And I don't really agree, because the other version of Richtofen is a different version. Technically, it's not the exact version of that who just died. He looks the same though. To most people, they're not really going to notice a big difference. So in that sense, I do understand what you're getting at, but it is technically a different version. It could have still been an emotional moment. It just really wasn't because of how they delivered it. And the last one here is the Magma Gat is a top 5 wonder weapon of all time. I'd probably put in the top 20 or something. It is pretty great. It's honestly probably even better than the Victrolic Withering, but you know, it's pretty solid, I have to agree. We have another hot take from Thunderstruck here. I had to say this one because this one, to me, I really agree with. Moon's Easter egg is legitimately one of the worst main Easter eggs in all of Zombies. It's way too reliant on RNG, and the only step that's even remotely fun is filling up the soul canisters. Everything else is either just mediocre or downright miserable to do. So I do like the Simon Says part of it as well. I think the Simon Says part and the filling up the soul canisters is fun, but everything else, yeah, it's just a bad Easter egg in my opinion. Like, I don't think it has many other fun steps, and yes, there's a heavy reliance on RNG here. You need a lot of items from the box, and especially if you're doing it solo on Black Ops 3 Zombies Chronicles, you have to go back and forth between the QEDs and the black hole thing, whatever you call it, the Gersh device. You have to go back and forth between those like 3 times. It's insane, because it's like I get the one out of box, I need to get the other one after the box right after, and then I need to get the other one again. It's just too much, and I personally really don't like really RNG reliant Easter eggs. I feel like when people talk about how much they love this Easter egg, a lot of it has to do with the story, because the story here is fantastic. I mean, you blow up the Earth at the end of it. Like, that's an amazing moment, one of the best moments in Call of Duty Zombies history. But at the end of the day, the Easter egg itself, in terms of the gameplay, it does kind of stink. I mean, I don't like Moon in general, so maybe that's why I feel that way, but it's not a fun Easter egg. Next up, Kraus5576 has 5 different hot takes to go with. So the first one is that Forsaken is the best Cold War round-based map, Outbreak being the best experience overall, Mauer is extremely overrated. So let's go one at a time here. I do think Forsaken's better than people give it credit for, at least compared to some of the other maps in that game. I actually like it more than D Maschine and Firebase C, but I still do prefer Mauer to Toten. I think Mauer is just a bit more interesting, especially with the layout. I think Forsaken's layout really holds the map back quite a bit. Outbreak being the best experience, I heavily disagree. I mean, I appreciated some aspects of Outbreak when it was released, but honestly, over time, I've been liking open world zombies less and less and less. Next, they say, in terms of gameplay, Gorod Krovi is not only the best BO3 map, but the best map of all time. This one, I don't disagree with necessarily, but I also don't agree with it. I'm kind of just like, yeah, I love Gorod Krovi. I personally don't call it the best map of all time, but it's up there. Like, I'm not going to disagree with that take, because it's a solid map. It deserves all the love it gets. I personally think it deserves even more love than it gets. Sometimes people do hate on it, but I think most people like Gorod Krovi, so I definitely agree there. Well, not fully, but partially agree. Next, they say Ascension is one of the worst Treyarch maps and is the single most overrated map in Zombies. I don't know. Ascension for me is kind of just okay. It's better than most Black Ops 1 maps in my opinion, but yeah, when you compare it to the greats of BO2, 3, 4, Infinite Warfare, stuff like that, it doesn't really hold up for me personally, at least not anymore, but I did love it back in the day. It was always my favorite map back in 2010 when, or I guess 2011, when Black Ops 1 was first out and we got the DLCs. I always was an Ascension fanboy. That was my map. And then over time, I started preferring Call of the Dead over Ascension quite a bit. The monkeys do kind of ruin that map quite a bit. Attack is a top 5 non-Treyarch Zombies map and is a top 20 map overall. I do think it's an underrated map, so again, I'm not gonna disagree with you fully. I don't know if it would be my top 5 non-Treyarch. It'd be close to it at least, but yeah, it's definitely an underrated map. If it wasn't for the drop cycle issues and zombie AI, IW would have the best mechanics in all of Zombies. I'm kind of gonna agree. I think the mechanics are fantastic. I do think the zombie AI can be a little iffy sometimes, but I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. So yeah, I agree though. It has some of the best mechanics already as is. So if you just fix a couple of those issues, it probably would have the best zombie mechanics of all time. The next one comes from Mark. In my opinion, the zombies community is unfairly neglecting every non-Treyarch zombies mode. Yes, Treyarch has made the best zombies experiences, but that doesn't mean the games not made by Treyarch are not worth playing. The community's hatred for anything not made by Treyarch is actually harming the mode overall because Activision is pulling Treyarch away from their current projects to work on the next one, leading to every game since Cold War feeling more or less half-baked. Yes, I 1000% agree. This is probably the one I agree with the most out of any take I've ever seen in my entire life. 1000% yes, we need the other studios making zombies modes as well, because if we keep going down this system of Treyarch making a new zombies mode almost every year, we're gonna get ass. It's just gonna be complete ass every year because they don't have enough time to work on their own, full product. I do think BO4 is gonna be a lot better than these recent modes just because they have put more time into it, but ultimately, like, what if we keep doing this down the line? Treyarch is not going to have enough time for their own games, and those other games are also going to be half-baked. We want to see what we had back in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, where all the developers made their own modes and were able to make them full of content. That's what we need again. I 1000% agree. And yeah, I do think in general, people are just unfairly neglecting them. They do. There's a lot of people who haven't even tried a single non-Treyarch zombies mode, and they immediately write it off just by hearing that it's not Treyarch. And to me, that's just, I don't know, it's just not a good way to go about it. Try it out. Maybe you'll like it. You never know. Of course, not everyone wants to, spend their full money on a new Call of Duty game, but with the Call of Duty's coming to Game Pass this year, hopefully, maybe you guys can actually try out some of those non-Treyarch modes. I would definitely recommend Infinite Warfare more than anything. Even World War II Zombies, I think the Final Reich is really, really good. And Exo Zombies, you don't really have to try that one. You can go without trying Exo Zombies. You'll be just fine not playing that. Next one is coming from Dr. Liquid, and they say, MWZ isn't as bad as everyone makes it out to be. The zombies community just doesn't like change. It definitely isn't perfect or even great by any means, but it's good. And Deep Fried Bullocks 4402 replies to this comment and actually kind of gives my exact thoughts on what I was going to say in response to this comment. Deep Fried Bullocks says, but Zombies is a horde mode and MWZ isn't. It would be like if COD multiplayer became an RPG instead of an FPS. It's not that the community doesn't like change, it's that this isn't what the game mode is meant to be for a lot of people. Now, what Dr. Liquid says up there, like, this is something I hear pretty frequently. Whenever people don't like certain new things added to Call of Duty Zombies, whether it's a new mode or some new change, and people immediately go, oh, you just don't like change. But that's not really what's happening. It's not just the fact that they don't like change. It's the fact that they don't like what it's changing to. If what the change was something that they enjoyed, well, then it wouldn't be a problem. I mean, look at Zombies overall. It has changed a lot, even just within the round-based formula. You go from World at War to Black Ops 3. Those two modes, they're night and day different. They're only like 7-something years apart in terms of when they released, but they are completely different games. In a good way, though. It was additive. There was only new stuff added. If you want to play any map in Black Ops 3 the way you'd play a map in like World at War or Black Ops 1, sure, you can't do it exactly the same way, but you can still do it. You still have that core formula there. If you want to load up the Giant and just play the same way you'd play Deriz, you can still do it. Yeah, there's new features like Gobblegums and stuff, but at the end of the day, the core formula is there, and that's what people like and appreciate. And, even go to Black Ops 4, they add a bunch of new things and new systems that a lot of people didn't like, but the core formula is still there. Then you go to Modern Warfare Zombies, this is not the core formula. This is a completely different thing. And that's not entirely a bad thing. I do think it's cool to see them experiment and try with some new things. But at the end of the day, the fact that we've had such little Zombies content for round-based in the past few years, it's really hard to get excited for something that's not round-based when we feel like we're getting so neglected in terms of round-based content. I guarantee if Cold War Zombies was full of Zombies content like Black Ops 3 and had a bunch of really quality maps, maybe Vanguard had a bunch of quality maps as well, then I don't think people would be complaining as much because we would have a significant amount of recent Zombies content within round-based that people wouldn't be complaining. But we've only had 6 round-based maps in the past 4 years, so it's pretty obvious why people were so furious when Modern Warfare 3 came out as a Zombies mode and was just this new open world experience that feels nothing like classic zombies. Even if they could maybe enjoy certain aspects of it, at the end of the day, it's not really what they want zombies for. It's like going to Taco Bell for pizza. It's that I'm not going there for pizza. I think they actually did put pizza on their menu once, but in general, that's not what I'm going there for. If they just suddenly stop giving tacos as frequently, I'm gonna be like, well, that's not what I'm coming to Taco Bell for. I don't personally go to Taco Bell at all regardless, but that's just the example I wanted to use. It's just, you go for something, you expect to get that, you know what I mean? So I don't think it's so crazy that a lot of fans want something more familiar to them. It doesn't mean they can't accept change. They just don't really want their zombies mode to turn into something completely different. They wanted to add, new content, maybe change up some features here or there, mechanics, whatever it may be, as long as it's good changes, of course. Not all innovation is good innovation. Hopefully Gulf War fixes this problem and we get a lot of round-based content, and then people won't be complaining about, when they try other modes as much. But I do think they really need to stick more to the round-based formula, because right now, those round-based modes just aren't doing great. Like, not enough people are interested in them because there's not enough content for it. How can we get that interested in the modern era of round-based zombies if we barely are getting any content, especially compared to prior years? Next unpopular opinion comes from Viral Edge, and he says Classified is the best map in Black Ops 4 Zombies. And I wanted to use this one because I don't really think this is that unpopular. I do think there's actually quite a few people who would put it in their top 3 maps of Black Ops 4. Usually it's 9 is the number 1, and then people say Ancient Evil, and then Classified's usually the third one, I feel like, at least from what I've seen. But for me, it's, in my opinion, the worst map in Black Ops 4, but not necessarily in a bad way, because I don't really think any map in Black Ops 4 is that terrible. I think even Classified is okay in some ways, but it's just the least interesting map to me. And I kind of realized why I feel this way a few days ago. I realized that in terms of modern zombies, or really any zombies since BO3, I don't really like how they play in non-Easter egg heavy maps. Any map without a bunch of Easter eggs and a bunch of side quests, I just don't think the new way of gameplay really works well. Especially you go to Black Ops 4, I love playing Black Ops 4 for the Easter eggs. I don't think I frequently play Black Ops 4 just to try to survive as long as I can. I don't feel like that gameplay feels that great in BO4. So when I go to play Classified, there's no main Easter egg. You have the Project Scatty side Easter egg, but I don't know, it's just not that fun of an Easter egg, and it just gives you a Winter's Howl, and I don't really feel like doing it usually. Obviously they do have a technical main Easter egg, but it's just getting to round 150. It's not really an Easter egg, but there's just not much stuff to do on Classified. I feel like whenever I play it, it's just too simplistic for me at this point. So I think that's why it's my least favorite in that game. At least every other BO4 map has a lot of stuff to do on them. But when you go back to World at War and BO1, I do enjoy, those simplistic maps, because I think the gameplay just worked better back then for those simplistic maps. But like I said, nowadays, I just don't think it works as well, which is probably why I really don't like the Chronicles remasters, because I just don't think Nocturne and Totem plays more fun in BO3 than it does in the classic games like World at War and BO1. I don't know, it's just something I've noticed over the years. I think the best we've ever seen in terms of gameplay on survival maps actually came from World War II. I think World War II survival maps were actually kind of fun. I don't know why. It probably had something to do with the box weapons. There was just a lot of interesting box weapons that you can pack a punch, and they did really unique things. I think Cold War's maps would have been okay just because there's a lot to grind for in those games as well. If there's a lot of stuff to grind for in terms of camos, I think it works better too, which I know BO4 did have that, but I never personally went for it because I heard it was a terrible grind, so I just never even bothered. But yeah, I don't know. I think I just prefer the more Easter egg heavy BO4 maps. This is probably why Classified is towards the bottom for me. Simon Kaufman says, Die Rise is the best zombies map of all time. Exo Zombies has the best gameplay mechanics of any non-Treyarch game. The Elixir system is better than the Gobblegum system. And Revenant from Cold War Zombies is the best character in any con zombie story. That's a lot of different opinions there, but let's break each one of them down. First of all, Die Rise is the best zombies map of all time. Wow, that's probably the most unpopular opinion we've had today. This man knew, he knew what to say. He came in here, he knew what to say exactly, because yes, this is by far the most unpopular opinion we've had today. Exo Zombies is the best gameplay mechanics of any non-Treyarch game. That one is outstandingly unpopular, and I honestly can't understand that one at all. I would love to hear some more specifics from Simon in the comments, because I don't understand how a single person could feel that way, but I'm open to hearing other opinions. To me, Exo Zombies has the worst gameplay mechanics of any zombies game period. It's just god awful all around. There's not a single good mechanic I think the mode has. The pack-a-punch system is awful. The way the exosuits work is awful. The zombies are awful. The way they, they swipe at you, the zombie AI is really frustrating. Pretty much everything I think is just bad in Exo Zombies. So I disagree. I think Infinite Warfare and World War II definitely feels a lot better. But that's just my opinion, of course. The Elixir system is better than the Gobblegum system. To be completely honest, I don't fully disagree with this. I think the Gobblegum system, in terms of like how it works with you getting the Gobblegum out of a Gobblegum like machine, I think that's better. But I also prefer how the elixirs aren't as powerful as the Gobblegums because I don't use them as frequently because of that. It doesn't break the game as frequently as I feel like Gobblegums break the game. And also you can't do the, the close application thing to save your Gobblegums with elixirs. So I don't use elixirs as much. And I feel like, again, it just doesn't break the game as frequently as elixirs do. So I agree and disagree in some ways. And Ravenoff being the best character in any COD zombie story, I wish I could get into the new Dark Ether story. I personally just have not found much interest in it, and Ravenoff is just not an interesting character to me personally. But I appreciate this unpopular opinion though. I think there's a lot of interesting ones here, so I appreciate that. Now here we got 2 hot takes from Gucci Marcus, and the first one is that the Beast and Afterlife mechanics in Mob of the Dead and Shadows of Evil are annoying and tedious. They hurt both of those maps in terms of game flow. I disagree personally. I actually really enjoy those mechanics. To me, it's an interesting idea to force the players to go into this like alternate sort of state where they have a limited time in this alternate state and they have to do things around the map. And I thought it was pretty cool. I personally prefer the beast mode though, because the issue with Afterlife is that when the time limit runs up, you just die. Like that makes it a lot less enjoyable because you can't really explore as long. Like with beast mode, you can explore as long as you want, but with the Afterlife, you have to make sure you have to hurry back to your person. You can't go too far away from yourself because then you'll just straight up die. So I do prefer the beast mode mechanics, but I don't know, these mechanics also, you don't really have to use them that frequently. You use them for the setup, but after the setup's done, you're kind of done using them the rest of the game. And you could maybe use them every now and then just as a little fun thing. For example, the Afterlife, you get it regardless. Obviously, if you go down, it's basically like free quick revives. Beast mode is a little different because you're not getting free quick revives out of that. It's something you have to physically go up to, but it's still fun to go into, kill zombies with, and go out of it and use it for those early moments. I personally prefer it, but I could understand why some people might not enjoy those mechanics. And Marcus also says Spaceland is a better map than Shadows. We actually already had this hot take before, surprisingly, but yeah, I agree with it. Next is from Ricochet3395, and they say the zombie storyline has sucked ass since Black Ops 2. The storyline was at its best before Origins. Origins is where I stopped caring about the story once Treyarch started adding gods, alternate dimensions, and hentai tentacle monsters. I've stopped giving a fuck about the zombie storyline. Okay, so this is one I hear pretty frequently. I personally do think the best storylines for zombies did come from pre-Black Ops 2, so I don't entirely disagree, but I also really do like stuff they did after that too. But for me, it's less about the story and it's more about just what zombies was and what it was able to become. Because on one hand, I do think the story overall was just better written before that time, but at the same time, I also don't think zombies would have been nearly as interesting if they didn't start exploring, the alternate dimensions and, like you said, the hentai tentacle monsters and gods. And there's a lot of more stuff they started adding that, to me, made zombies more interesting, at least from a visual and aesthetic perspective. Not even talking about the story, but just having maps like Shadows of Evil, the Reisendrak, Garad Krovi, you go to Black Ops 4 with the Chaos maps, and there's just so much crazy stuff added into these zombie storylines. I don't think zombies would be nearly as interesting without all of that. But in terms of just pure writing, yeah, I did prefer some of the stuff from World at War and BO1, but it wasn't because of them not having as many, alternate dimensions and crazy stuff like what they added later on. I'm personally completely okay with what they did decide to do. I just think sometimes the writing got a little bit, not as interesting, I guess, as it was before. I don't think Black Ops 2 was that good, though. I thought the Victor storyline was kind of bad, but Origins I thought was really solid. So there's certain points in time where I prefer it more than other times, but I don't think it's like this is exactly where the story went downhill and then it's always been bad since then. I don't entirely agree with that. Next up is coming from James Sons 123. Black Ops 1 Zombies isn't even that good. There's like nothing to do. And if you want to argue that modern zombies is too complicated, then you can just not do the stuff that your brain somehow can't comprehend. So yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. I don't think Black Ops 1's nearly as good as some of the other recent zombies modes, especially from Black Ops 2 to Black Ops 4. Back in like 2010, I didn't really care too much because it's all we really knew. All we really had was World at War and Black Ops 1 at the time, so I did enjoy it a lot more. Just the idea of just playing till you get to around 30 and then dying, like that was a fun experience. But once you started getting stuff like Mob of the Dead, Buried Origins, and then into Black Ops 3 and onward, it was hard to go back to those old modes and really have a lot of fun with it long term. Like I could not see myself playing Black Ops 1 Zombies every day now. Like it just wouldn't happen, because what is there to do? I would be playing the same exact thing again and again. It would get very repetitive. There's just not enough options there. They do have Easter eggs. They're just not that great of Easter eggs, and obviously most of them you have to do with 4 players. Therefore, they're just less interesting in my opinion. And yeah, like he says, like a lot of people complain that zombies nowadays is too complicated. Well, maybe not nowadays, but at least during the Black Ops 3 and Black Ops 4 time period. I feel like most of that complicated stuff you didn't have to really take part in. You know, most of it was optional. We talk about Easter eggs, those are all optional. They've always been optional. They've always been relatively complicated, so you don't have to do anything with them. And obviously all the side quests too, like you don't have to do any of them. You don't have to bother. And pack-a-punch quests, like I said, there's maybe some exceptions here or there, but most of them, they're not difficult really. So I don't know. I agree, certainly, but at the same time, I can appreciate Black Ops 1 for what it was. Yeah, it's definitely not in my top 5 zombies modes, not even close. And the last hot take we have here is from Cristiano Ronaldo. The Maschine is overrated. It's one of the most boring maps in zombies history. I don't know if it's one of the most boring, but I definitely do think it's overrated. It's definitely not that interesting of a map. It's got one of the most plain Easter eggs of all time, and the map has barely anything on it. There's not many side quests, and the side quests that are there are kind of stupid. They're not really worth doing. And the map's flow in general, it's just very basic. That's what it's meant to be. It's the launch map, obviously, in that game, and it was meant to bring back a lot of, you know, new players or introduce new players and bring back old fans, I guess. But it's just in a lot of ways a boring map. But I do agree. I think the only reason I ever would play this map is for camo grinding. That's the only reason I think I ever have played this map, is just camo grinding, which you can play that on any map. It doesn't matter what the map, how good the map is. Camo grinding can work anywhere. The map itself is definitely interesting. It lacks personality, it lacks stuff to do on it, and yes, it's got one of the worst Easter eggs ever. So I kind of agree. I do kind of agree. And hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Which of these unpopular opinions do you agree with? Which ones do you disagree with? And give me some more in the comments. Let me know your unpopular opinions. I'd love to hear it. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.